The Galactic Empire's overconfidence. The Galactic Empire had always been a force to be reckoned with. Across the stars, their name was synonymous with power, control, and domination. They had crushed civilizations, wiped out entire fleets, and imposed their rule without mercy. No one had ever stood up to them and won. The galaxy was their playground, and every world was a piece in their growing empire. As the empire expanded, their leaders grew confident, even arrogant, in their superiority. They believed they were invincible. For centuries, they had faced no serious opposition. Their fleet was unmatched, their technology far beyond the reach of any species they encountered. So when the time came to invade Earth, they did so with little thought, treating the planet as nothing more than an afterthought, a minor world that would fall as easily as the others before it. Earth had no advanced military presence. No one expected it to be anything more than a weak, defenseless planet. The Empire's leaders were gathered in a grand war room aboard their flagship, the Eviscerator. The room was filled with officers, generals, and high-ranking officials, all of them gloating over their latest conquest. They had just crushed another alien race, and their victory was fresh in their minds. They were ready to move on, ready to erase Earth from the map. Another simple victory, General Kor, the Empire's chief strategist, said with a smug grin. "We've already taken down more powerful civilizations than this. Earth will fall within days. We'll add it to the Empire's glorious history." The officers around him nodded in agreement, sharing in his confidence. They had all seen the same pattern before: conquer, subdue, move on. Earth would be no different. They had the best weapons, the largest fleet, and the best trained soldiers. What could humans possibly do to stop them? In the command center, the Empire's fleet prepared for the final phase of the invasion. Massive warships, each larger than any human-built vessel, were readied for battle. They had the firepower to reduce entire cities to rubble with a single strike. Nothing on Earth could stand up to them. The ships were equipped with advanced energy shields, plasma cannons, and fleets of droids ready to land on Earth's surface and take control of the planet. As the fleet gathered at the edge of Earth's orbit, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The Empire's soldiers were eager to set foot on Earth, expecting a quick victory. They imagined their arrival would be met with fear, despair, and surrender. The humans would not even know what hit them. "The fleet is ready," said Commander Froze, standing beside the holographic map. "We'll begin the assault in 1 hour, targeting Earth's major cities. Expect immediate surrender." Kor looked over at the map, smiling. "By the time the humans realize what's happening, we'll already have control of their planet. Earth will be a part of the Empire within days." The atmosphere in the war room was filled with smug satisfaction. The Galactic Empire had crushed worlds far more advanced than Earth. What could possibly go wrong? Meanwhile, on Earth, the human governments had detected the incoming fleet, but had no idea of its true scale or power. They had been preparing for years, knowing that Earth was becoming a target. They had no illusions of being able to defeat such a mighty force with traditional military strategies. But what they didn't know, what the Empire didn't know, was that the humans had something the Empire had never considered: ingenuity. For centuries, humanity had relied on its ability to adapt and think outside the box. They had created weapons, strategies, and technologies not by brute force, but through creative problem-solving. While the Empire expected Earth to fight in conventional ways, they had no idea that the humans had been secretly working on something much bigger. The Empire was about to face an entirely new kind of enemy, one they had never encountered before. As the minutes ticked down to the beginning of the assault, Kor and his officers continued to talk among themselves, oblivious to the preparation unfolding on Earth. They assumed the battle would be quick and easy. They assumed their victory was inevitable. After all, what could a primitive planet like Earth do against the might of the Galactic Empire? Yet, despite all their confidence, something was beginning to shift. In the quiet depths of Earth's underground bunkers, A team of scientists and military strategists worked tirelessly, assembling a plan so bold, so audacious, that it could change the course of history. But the Empire knew nothing of it. They had underestimated Earth in ways they couldn't even begin to comprehend. "Get ready," General Kor said, standing up from his chair and looking out into the vastness of space. "This will be the easiest conquest we've ever had." He didn't know it yet, but his words would come back to haunt him. The humans were not as helpless as the Empire believed. Their victory was not guaranteed, and in the coming moments, everything would change. As the countdown began, Earth's defenses were quietly powered up. The first wave of human ships, small and seemingly insignificant, took position. They didn't look like much, just dots against the backdrop of the massive Imperial fleet. But appearances were deceiving. The humans had something up their sleeves, something the Empire had never expected. The invasion was about to begin, but the Empire had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated humanity. And soon, they would learn the consequences of that mistake. As the first wave of the Galactic Empire's ships began their descent toward Earth, the commanding officers aboard the massive warships watched with increasing excitement. The vast fleets of Imperial vessels hovered just outside the planet's atmosphere, their engines glowing with power as they prepared to unleash their might. These ships, armed to the teeth with weapons capable of devastating entire cities in seconds, were poised to strike with precision. They believed the humans would stand no chance. Commander Vrose paced around the command center, his fingers lightly tapping the edge of his console. The Empire's forces had been successful in countless campaigns, and he expected Earth to be no different. They would strike hard and fast, leaving no room for any meaningful resistance. Earth's primitive technologies were no match for their advanced weaponry. This was supposed to be a quick and efficient conquest. He had already started to picture the celebrations, the grand parties once Earth was officially under Imperial rule. As the invasion began, Imperial warships released swarms of landing craft, each carrying droids and soldiers ready to storm Earth's surface. They expected the humans to react with fear, retreating into their cities, hiding from the inevitable. But as the first dropships made their descent, something unexpected happened. A strange signal was detected. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even something the Empire had planned for. It was almost a laugh. At first, the officers didn't know what to make of it. Was it a glitch? A trick? No, it was definitely there. A steady sound echoing through their communication channels. And as they listened, the laughter grew louder. It wasn't just one person, but a chorus, like the sounds of a crowd mocking them from the farthest corners of the galaxy. The officers exchanged puzzled looks, but they were too confident to give it much thought. It was probably just the work of a few isolated humans, attempting to delay the inevitable with distractions. But this laughter wasn't something that would be silenced by mere distractions. As the Imperial fleet continued its approach, the human forces remained eerily quiet. The Empire's commanders expected to see signs of desperation, of fear. But instead, they noticed something else. The humans weren't afraid. They weren't running. They were preparing. On the ground, Earth's military leaders had been working for years, quietly building up their forces in secret. They had known the Empire might come, and while they lacked the technological power of their invaders, they made up for it in creativity and resourcefulness. Using what little they had constructed a series of weapons and countermeasures that could turn the tide. They were small, unassuming ships, but they packed a punch. The human ships, far smaller than the Imperial warships, had been hidden in plain sight, disguised as ordinary civilian transport vessels. Their purpose was simple: to serve as the first line of defense and to buy time. It was a strategy that few could have predicted, but it worked. As the Imperial fleet continued to deploy its forces, the human ships began to make their move. The small vessels took off from their hidden bases, speeding toward the Imperial fleet at full throttle. The Empire's sensors were slow to react, Unable to track the movements of these ships as they darted between larger, more advanced warships, using the dense space debris and asteroids as cover. The surprise was complete. The first volley of fire from the human ships hit one of the Imperial destroyers before its crew even knew what was happening. The blast sent the massive warship into a spin, its shields unable to absorb the shock. The Imperial officers on board were stunned. They had expected to face nothing but helpless humans, not these unpredictable, well-armed fighters. The Empire's response was swift. A counterattack was launched, but the humans were already one step ahead. They had designed their ships to be faster, more agile, and capable of dodging attacks. The humans used hit-and-run tactics, attacking swiftly before disappearing into the shadows. The Empire's ships were big and powerful, but they were also slow, their massive weapons taking time to recharge. As the battle raged on, the Empire's officers began to realize they were being outmaneuvered. The humans had no intention of surrendering. They weren't running away. They were fighting back in ways that no one had expected. The laughter they had heard earlier wasn't just a distraction. It was a sign of the humans' unwavering confidence. They weren't intimidated by the Empire. They were laughing because they knew something the Empire didn't. This battle wasn't over. Despite their initial overconfidence, the Empire's commanders began to worry. They had underestimated humanity. They had thought the humans would cower in fear, but instead, they were facing a force that was just as relentless and determined as they were. The tables had turned, and the once proud Empire found itself on the defensive. They had never encountered anything like this before. And then, as if to add insult to injury, the humans launched their secret weapon, a weapon so powerful, so unexpected, that it sent shockwaves through the entire fleet. The Empire had no time to react. It was too late. The humans had already taken control of the situation, and the Galactic Empire would never be the same again. The laughter that had filled the Empire's communications channels grew louder and more triumphant. The humans were not just fighting for their survival, they were fighting for their pride, and they were winning. The battle wasn't over yet, but the Empire had already lost something far more important than the fight. They had lost their sense of invincibility, and they were about to learn the hard way that underestimating humanity was the greatest mistake they could have made. The battle continued to unfold in ways the Galactic Empire had never anticipated. At first, the Imperial officers tried to regain their composure, barking orders to their crews and attempting to launch larger, more coordinated attacks. But the humans were relentless, and every attempt to retaliate only seemed to make the situation worse for the Empire. As the Imperial fleet tried to regain control, they quickly realized something they had not expected. The humans were not only fighting with advanced technology, but were using strategies that no one could have predicted. The humans were not just responding to the Empire's moves. They were controlling the flow of the battle, dictating the pace and tempo of the fight. Their ships darted around the Imperial fleet like nimble insects, weaving between the larger, slower warships with astonishing precision. The humans weren't just fighting to defend Earth. They were fighting to prove a point. Commander Vros, the leader of the Imperial fleet, found himself at the center of the chaos. He stood in the command center of the lead destroyer, his eyes scanning the countless holographic displays that filled the room. Every screen showed something different. Enemy ships, explosions, sudden flashes of energy from weapons fire. But one thing remained constant. No matter how many Imperial ships were lost, the humans kept fighting, never once backing down. Their tactics were unusual, unpredictable, and downright maddening. They had no regard for traditional military doctrine. "Prepare another attack," Vros ordered, his voice tight with frustration. "We will crush them, no matter what it takes." His officers scrambled to obey, preparing to launch a full-on assault, but as the orders were passed down, another shockwave hit the fleet. Suddenly, one of the largest Imperial warships, a massive dreadnought with weapons capable of destroying entire continents, was rocked by an explosion. The ship's shields flared up, but they couldn't stop the barrage of fire from the human ships. The human vessels had learned how to bypass the Imperial technology and were striking at weak points in the fleet's defense. The dreadnought's captain scrambled to coordinate a defense, but it was already too late. The ship was taking heavy damage, and before long, it was clear that it was going to lose the fight. With all power diverted to shields, the Empire's mighty dreadnought slowly began to drift off course, its crew helpless in the face of an enemy they could not even see. Commander Vrose watched in disbelief as his flagship's once proud fleet was torn apart, piece by piece. "What are they doing?" he muttered under his breath as his fingers flew over the control panel, trying to figure out the source of the attacks. How are they so effective? The truth was simple. The humans were not fighting conventionally. They didn't rely on brute force alone. Instead, they used their creativity, their adaptability, and most importantly, their willingness to take risks. Where the Empire relied on overwhelming firepower, the humans relied on agility, intelligence, and the ability to think several steps ahead. The Empire's greatest strength, its sheer size and firepower, was becoming its greatest weakness. Meanwhile, down on Earth's surface, the human leaders and their commanders were watching the battle unfold with a sense of grim determination. While most of the population had no idea what was happening in space, the military leaders knew that this was the fight of their lives. They had never faced an opponent as powerful as the Galactic Empire, and yet they refused to back down. They had always believed in their potential as a species, and now they had the chance to prove it to the universe. In underground bunkers and command centers, military strategists and engineers were monitoring the situation closely. They had prepared for years, quietly building up defenses and weapons that could counter the Empire's superior technology. They knew their ships were no match for the Empire's dreadnoughts in terms of firepower, but they had one advantage: their ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. They could make do with what they had, improving and improvising on the fly. Human ships, equipped with weapons that seemed outdated compared to the Empire's advanced tech, were using the terrain of space to their advantage. They darted in and out of asteroid fields, using their surroundings to shield themselves from the Empire's weapons. Their ships were small and fast, difficult to target. It was a constant game of cat and mouse, but the humans were playing it far better than the Empire had ever expected. The laughter that had echoed through the Empire's communication channels at the beginning of the battle was now replaced by stunned silence. Every time the Empire thought it had gained an advantage, the humans would find a way to turn the tables. The Empire's once confident commanders were now questioning everything they had assumed about their superiority. They had believed that the humans were nothing more than primitive creatures, easy to subjugate and destroy. But as the battle raged on, they saw a different side to humanity, a side they had never expected. Commander Vrose stood in the heart of his command center, watching his fleet being torn apart, and he realized just how badly the Empire had underestimated Earth. He thought back to the early days of the invasion, to the confident speeches, and the promise of a swift victory. He had never imagined that this battle would last so long, that humans would be able to hold their own for so long against a force as mighty as the Galactic Empire. It was then that he finally understood. The humans didn't fight like anyone he had encountered before. They didn't follow the rules of war. They made their own rules. They fought with a raw determination, a hunger to survive, and a spirit that couldn't be broken. They weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting for something far greater, their freedom. And now, with every passing moment, it became more clear that the Empire had made a grave mistake by underestimating Earth and its people. They had thought the humans would be easy to crush. They had fought wrong. The battle was far from over, and the tide was turning in humanity's favor. The Galactic Empire was about to learn the true meaning of underestimating an opponent, and the cost of that mistake would be greater than they could ever imagine. The battle continued to rage in the vacuum of space, with both sides suffering significant losses. The Galactic Empire, still reeling from the shock of Earth's unexpected resistance, was struggling to maintain any semblance of control. Commander Vroz, having watched as his fleet slowly dwindled, realized that his position was becoming increasingly precarious. He had underestimated the humans, and now, the consequences of that mistake were becoming more evident by the minute. As the Imperial ships regrouped, desperately trying to counter the unexpected human tactics, they were met with a relentless onslaught. The human ships, small but fast, darted through the battlefield with precision and agility, using the debris of destroyed ships and asteroid fields as shields. The Empire's firepower was unmatched in raw destructive power, but it was being outwitted and outmaneuvered by the humans' unpredictable, guerrilla-style warfare. Every move the Empire made was anticipated and countered with terrifying accuracy. Commander Vroz paced back and forth in his command center, his mind racing as he tried to formulate a strategy that would give the Empire the upper hand once again. But nothing he or his officers came up with seemed to work. The humans, it seemed, were always one step ahead. Each time they were cornered, they found a way to escape, to strike back with renewed force. There was something about their strategy that baffled the Empire's officers. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something far more significant. There was a burning passion in their actions, a will to defy the Empire that was unlike anything the Empire had ever seen before. Vroz turned to his second-in-command, a battle-hardened officer named Tarek. "Why are we losing?" he demanded, his voice low but filled with frustration. "We have the superior fleet, the technology. Why can't we crush them?" Tarek hesitated for a moment, as if trying to find the right words. "Sir, they aren't fighting like we do. They don't rely on overwhelming firepower or superior numbers. Instead, they use their agility, their unpredictability. They fight on their terms, using whatever advantage they can find, even in the smallest details. It's like they're not just fighting a battle. They're waging a war on our arrogance." Vroz glared at Tarek, his anger building. "Arrogance? What do you mean by that?" Tarek cleared his throat. "They underestimated us, yes, but they also underestimated Earth itself. We thought we could steamroll them, crush their defenses, and take their planet without a second thought. But the humans, they aren't like any species we've encountered before. They fight with heart, with spirit. They aren't afraid to take risks, to go against the grain. And that's what's making them so unpredictable." Vroz's eyes narrowed. The realization hit him like a cold slap. The Empire had always relied on its size, its firepower, its overwhelming superiority to crush any opposition. But here, against Earth's human fleet, it was clear that the rules had changed. The Empire's methods, its reliance on brute force and dominance, were proving to be their downfall. The humans, it seemed, had something far more dangerous, a relentless drive and an uncanny ability to adapt on the fly. Desperation crept into Vroz's mind. He had no choice but to escalate the conflict. If he didn't take drastic action now, the Empire's entire fleet would be decimated. His command center was filled with frantic officers shouting orders, but Vroz's mind was elsewhere, consumed by the realization of how badly things had gone wrong. He had underestimated the humans, and now they were fighting back with everything they had. "Send word to the rest of the fleet," he barked. "We need to break their lines. We can't let them keep outmaneuvering us. We'll use everything we have. No mercy, no hesitation. If we have to burn this sector to the ground, so be it." His fleet had been designed to crush civilizations, to obliterate any resistance in their path. Yet here they were, struggling against a race they had assumed would be easy to wipe out. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the human forces were not only fighting the battle in space, but were preparing for the long-term war. Military leaders and civilians alike had united, their spirits undeterred by the mounting challenges. It was as if the entire planet had become a war machine, focused on one singular goal: survival. Every resource was mobilized. Weapons were mass-produced, and every person, regardless of background, was contributing in whatever way they could. The unity of the human race was something that the Galactic Empire could never have anticipated. Humanity's ability to rally behind a cause, to fight with a fierce sense of purpose, was something beyond the comprehension of the invaders. As the battle raged on, Commander Vro's desperation grew. His officers scrambled to formulate a new plan, one that would give them an edge. But every idea was met with failure. The humans were everywhere. They were on the offensive, launching counterattacks in waves. The Empire had become the prey, while the humans had become the predators. Then, just as Vros was beginning to lose hope, a voice crackled over the communication line. It was his fleet's intelligence officer. "Commander, we've detected a strange energy signature coming from the humans' flagship. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Vros's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, unlike anything we've seen before?" The officer hesitated, then replied, It's a weapon, sir. A new kind of weapon. We've never encountered anything like it. The readings are off the charts. If we don't find a way to disable it, they could turn the tide of this battle." Vros's mind raced. The humans were holding something back. A secret weapon, perhaps one that could end the battle once and for all. He knew he had to act fast. "Prepare a fleet to intercept that ship," he ordered. "We can't let them use whatever it is they're hiding." The Empire launched a full-scale assault on the human flagship. But just as Vros had feared, the weapon was far more powerful than anything the Empire had ever seen. The humans had taken advantage of their own ingenuity, using the very nature of the battle to create a weapon that could unleash devastating energy, more than capable of taking down entire fleets. It was a game-changer, and it would give them the upper hand they needed to win the war. As the Empire's fleet closed in, the human flagship unleashed the weapon. A bright, blinding beam of energy shot out, striking the leading ships of the Empire's fleet. The blast was so powerful that it tore through the hulls of the ships like paper. The force was too much, and the Empire's ships began to explode in rapid succession. Vros's command ship, along with many others, was crippled by the attack, and the once proud fleet was reduced to floating debris in the vacuum of space. Vros watched in disbelief as the human ships closed in on the remnants of the Empire's fleet, their weapons firing with deadly accuracy. The humans had won. Against all odds, they had proven that the might of the Galactic Empire was nothing compared to the spirit and ingenuity of humanity. The victory was theirs, and the Empire could only watch as Earth's ships reclaimed their place as the true power in the galaxy. As the battle ended and the humans celebrated their hard-fought victory, Vros could only reflect on the one thing he had failed to understand. He had underestimated humanity, believing that their strength was measured by their technology alone. But he had learned the hard way that humanity's true power lay not in their ships or weapons, but in their unyielding will to fight for their freedom, no matter the cost. The Galactic Empire had been shocked, humbled, and ultimately defeated. Earth's dreadnoughts had arrived, and everything had changed. The orders were sent out, but as Vros prepared to launch his fleet's final assault, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Even in the chaos of the battle, the humans weren't acting like an ordinary enemy. They were more than just soldiers. They were a force of nature, driven by something that couldn't be destroyed by weapons alone. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity's resolve had only strengthened. The leaders of Earth knew that they were fighting not just for survival, but for their very way of life. They had watched as their cities were attacked, as the sky itself was filled with the fire of war. But they also knew that they had something the Empire didn't: an unbreakable will to survive, to fight for their freedom and their future. And that determination was fueling their victory in ways that the Empire couldn't possibly understand. On Earth's surface, the battle was being fought on multiple fronts. The military forces, now fully mobilized, were sending every available resource into space, preparing to launch even more powerful weapons. The war wasn't just in the heavens above. It was felt on every continent, from the hidden bunkers of Earth's military command to the streets of cities under siege. Humanity was united in their fight. The cries of the fallen, the terror of the battlefield. It was all part of the same battle cry. The humans were prepared for anything. They had spent decades studying their enemies, learning how to adapt to any situation. The Galactic Empire had underestimated them at every turn, and now, with every passing hour, they were paying the price for that mistake. Back in space, Vroz's desperate attacks continued, but they were no longer yielding the results he had hoped for. The human ships were still elusive, striking from unexpected angles, using every trick in the book. Even when the Empire managed to land a few hits, the damage seemed minimal. It was as if every attack the Empire made was just another step in the humans' relentless march to victory. With each failed attempt to regain control, Vroz's frustration mounted. He had thought that his fleet was unbeatable, that the might of the Empire could crush anything in its path. But against the humans, he was learning that nothing was certain. As the battle wore on, the realization finally dawned on him. This fight wasn't just about technology. It wasn't about firepower or tactics. It was about something far deeper. And that was the one thing the Galactic Empire could never anticipate: the power of human will. As the days dragged on, the battle between the Galactic Empire and Earth's forces reached an intensity that neither side had ever expected. The Empire, with all its technological superiority and vast fleet, had underestimated the resilience of humanity. Commander Vroz, now facing an increasingly impossible situation, could not believe what he was witnessing. The humans, whose planet he had once thought to be an easy conquest, had proved to be more resourceful, more determined, and more capable than any race he had encountered in his many years of conquest. Vroz watched from his command ship as human fighters darted through space with incredible agility, evading the Empire's massive weaponry. Each time they struck, it felt as if the humans were everywhere. The Empire's fleet, so carefully designed for overwhelming force, was proving to be ineffective against the humans' cunning tactics. No matter how much firepower the Empire unleashed, it seemed to do little more than scratch the surface of Earth's defenses. It wasn't just the humans' tactics that set them apart. It was their spirit. The Empire had expected to face soldiers, warriors bound by duty, ready to fight with the cold, calculated efficiency that the Empire prided itself on. But these humans were different. They fought with a fire that Vroz couldn't comprehend. Every time the Empire made a move, the humans seemed to anticipate it, countering with tactics that were chaotic yet effective. Their ships moved in erratic patterns, sometimes appearing as if they were simply throwing themselves at the Empire's forces with reckless abandon. But Vroz had learned, painfully, that there was a method to their madness. In the heat of battle, as the Empire's fleet struggled to reorganize and launch another attack, an unsettling thought crossed Vroz's mind. What if they couldn't win? What if the Empire's might, its seemingly infinite resources, were no match for the drive and determination of a single planet of humans? The possibility was almost unthinkable, yet the evidence was mounting with every passing moment. His fleet was suffering devastating losses. Their numbers were dwindling, their ships crippled by the humans' relentless onslaught. Vroz could see the panic setting in among his officers.